The needle slipped through fabric with practiced precision while Penelope Brennan squinted in the dim afternoon light, filtering through the single grimy window of her cramped room above the general store. Her fingers bleeding from where she had pricked them too many times that week, working 16-hour days to finish Mrs. Henderson's dress for half what the work was worth. The year was 1882, and Nogales, Arizona was a town that took everything it could from those who had little to give. She set down the emerald silk dress and flexed her aching fingers, examining the calluses that had formed over calluses, the perpetual indent where the thimble pressed against her thumb. 23 years old, and her hands looked like they belonged to a woman twice her age. The dress she was working on would sell for $30 at the mercantile once Mrs. Henderson claimed she had sewn it herself, but Penelope would see only 3 of those dollars. $3 for 80 hours of work, for eyes strained nearly to blindness, for a spine that felt like it might snap from hunching over her sewing table. The sound of boots on the wooden stairs outside her door made her tense. Rent was due yesterday, and Mr. Garrison had no patience for late payments, even though he knew perfectly well that half the town owed her money for work she had already completed. She stood quickly, smoothing down her faded brown dress, the only one she owned that did not have visible patches. But the knock that came was gentler than Mr. Garrison's usual demanding pound. "Miss Brennan, I have some items that need mending." The voice was unfamiliar, deep and measured. Penelope opened the door to find a man she had never seen before standing in the narrow hallway. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His hat was in his hands, a sign of respect that immediately surprised her. Men in Nogales did not usually bother with such courtesies when dealing with her. "I can take a look," she said cautiously, noting the quality of his clothing. His shirt was well-made cotton, his vest leather that had been properly cared for, his boots expensive. Not a rancher, then, or at least not one who did his own dirty work. What needs doing? 3 shirts that need buttons replaced, 2 pairs of trousers with torn seams, and a coat that needs the lining repaired, he said. "I know it is a lot of work. I am prepared to pay fairly." Penelope almost laughed at that. Every person who walked through her door claimed they would pay fairly, and every single one of them tried to negotiate her price down to nothing once the work was completed. "Fairly means different things to different people," she said. "The work you are describing would take me 4 days, maybe 5. Most folks around here think $1 is generous payment for that much time." The man's jaw tightened. "Most folks around here are thieves, then. I was thinking more along the lines of $20. The number hit her like a physical blow. $20. That was more than she usually made in 2 months. It had to be a trick, some kind of cruel joke. $20, she repeated slowly. "Is that not enough?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather wallet, thick with bills. "I can go higher if the work warrants it. I have been told you are the finest seamstress in the territory." "Who told you that?" Penelope asked, suspicious now. No one in Nogales would have praised her skill. They were too busy exploiting it. "The woman who runs the boarding house in Tucson, Mrs. Chen. She showed me a dress you made for her daughter's wedding last year. Said she had to travel all the way here because no one else could do the detail work you can." He met her eyes directly. "My name is William Yates. I run cattle between here and California. I am in town for the next 2 weeks settling some business, and I would prefer not to look like I've been dragged behind my horse." Penelope studied him carefully, looking for the catch, the angle, the moment when this would transform into another humiliation. But his expression remained open, patient. "I will need half up front," she finally said, "and I will need to see the items to give you a proper estimate. Of course." William pulled out a $10 bill and held it out to her. "I have the clothes at the hotel." Would you be willing to come take a look now? Or I can bring them here if you prefer. The hotel was public, safer than being alone with a strange man in her room, and $10 was already in her hand, real and solid. I can come now. They walked down the stairs together and out onto the dusty main street. The afternoon sun was brutal, turning the air thick and heavy. Penelope was acutely aware of how shabby she must look next to William's neat appearance, her dress worn thin at the elbows and hem. Her shoes held together more by determination than leather at this point. The hotel was the nicest building in Nogales, 2 stories of whitewashed wood with an actual glass window in the front. Penelope had never been inside. William held the door for her, and she stepped into blessed coolness. The proprietor, Mr. Dixon, looked up from his desk and his eyes narrowed when he saw her. "She is with me," William said calmly before Mr. Dixon could speak. "We have business to discuss." Mr. Dixon's disapproval was palpable, but he said nothing. William led Penelope up the stairs to a room at the end of the hall. It was larger than her entire living space, with a real bed, a wardrobe, a desk, and a window that actually opened. He gestured to a pile of clothing on the bed. Penelope set down her small bag of supplies and began examining the items. The shirts were good quality cotton, worn but clean. The buttons needed replacing on all 3, and one had a tear in the sleeve that would need careful mending. The trousers were newer, the seams split from hard riding. The coat was beautiful, lined with silk that had come loose from the outer wool. This was at least a week of work, possibly more if she wanted to do it right. "The coat alone would take me 3 days," she said. "The lining needs to be completely reattached and some of the silk is damaged. I would need to replace sections of it. Can you do it?" "Yes, but it will not be cheap. Silk costs money." "I told you I will pay fairly. What is your price for all of it?" Penelope did the calculation in her head. If she charged what the work was actually worth, it would be at least $40. But no one in their right mind would pay that much, and she was afraid to lose the job by asking too high. $30, she said, including materials. William pulled out his wallet again and counted out $30 in bills. "Here." She stared at the money. "You already gave me 10. Consider it a deposit on future work. I am certain I will need more before I leave town." He placed the bills in her hand. "How long before everything is finished?" "A week if I work steady." Her mind was racing. $40. She had $40 in her hand. This was enough to pay 3 months of rent. This was enough to buy fabric for a new dress. This was enough to eat something other than beans and hard bread for more than a few days. A week is fine. Should I come to your room to check on the progress, or would you prefer to bring the items here when they are ready? "I will bring them here," Penelope said quickly. She did not want anyone seeing a man visiting her room regularly. The town already thought little enough of her. "Thank you, Mr. Yates. This is very generous." "It is not generous to pay someone what their work is worth," he said, and there was something sharp in his tone. "That is just basic decency." Penelope gathered the clothes carefully and packed them into her bag. William walked her back downstairs, again holding doors and waiting patiently while she maneuvered through them with her awkward bundle. On the street, several people had stopped to watch. Mrs. Henderson was standing outside the mercantile, her face pinched with curiosity. Mayor Frost was on the steps of the town hall, arms crossed. "Good afternoon, Miss Brennan," William said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I appreciate you taking on this work on such short notice. It is a relief to find someone in this town who takes pride in their craft." He tipped his hat to her and walked toward the saloon. Penelope hurried back to her room, clutching the bag of clothes and the impossible amount of money in her pocket. She worked through the night, too anxious to sleep. The money was hidden under a loose floorboard, and she checked it 3 times to make sure it was real, that she had not imagined the entire encounter. But the bills were there, crisp and genuine, and the clothes were real too, spread across every surface in her small room. She started with the shirts, removing the old buttons and sewing on new ones with tiny, precise stitches. The work was familiar, soothing. Her fingers moved automatically while her mind wandered. William Yates was not like the other men in town. He had looked at her like she was a person, not a convenience. He had paid her what the work was worth without arguing, without trying to negotiate her into the ground. It made her angry, suddenly and intensely. If one man could afford to pay fairly, why could none of the others? Why had she spent 5 years in this town being squeezed dry by people who knew exactly what they were doing, who knew they were taking advantage of her desperation? The anger fueled her through the next 3 days. She barely slept, working from dawn until long past midnight. The shirts were finished first, buttoned secure, and the tear in the sleeve mended so carefully that it was nearly invisible. The trousers took longer, the seams requiring complete reconstruction. She ripped out the old stitching and sewed them back together with tight, even stitches that would hold through another year of hard use. The coat was the real challenge. The silk lining was shredded in places, torn along the seams in others. She carefully removed all of it, then went to the mercantile to buy replacement silk. Mr. Henderson tried to charge her double the usual price, but she stared him down until he relented, accepting the fair amount with poor grace. Doing work for that new fellow staying at the hotel. He asked as he cut the fabric. "Yes. Heard he paid you $40. Mr. Henderson's tone was accusing. "He paid me what the work is worth. Seems excessive to me. You have never charged anyone else that much." "No one else has ever offered to pay that much," Penelope said evenly. "And no one else has ever brought me this much work at once." She took the silk and left before he could continue the interrogation, but the encounter left her shaken. The whole town was already talking about her arrangement with William. She could feel the weight of their judgment, their suspicion. A woman accepting money from a strange man could only mean one thing in their narrow minds. By the 6th day, everything was finished. The shirts looked almost new, the trousers were sturdy, and the coat was transformed. She had matched the new silk to the old so well that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The work was some of the best she had ever done. She packed everything carefully and walked to the hotel in the late afternoon. Mr. Dixon gave her the same disapproving look but allowed her to go upstairs. She knocked on William's door and he opened it immediately. "Miss Brennan, please come in." She stepped inside and set the bundle on the bed. "Everything is finished. I think you will be satisfied with the quality." William examined each item carefully, turning the shirts inside out to check the seams, holding the coat up to the light to inspect the lining. His expression was intent, focused. Finally, he nodded. "This is excellent work, better than I expected." "I do not do poor work," Penelope said, a little defensive. "I can see that. These are perfect." He pulled on one of the shirts, then the coat, checking the fit. "You even adjusted the sleeve length on the coat. It was hanging wrong. You are taller than the man it was originally made for." "How much do I owe you for that adjustment?" "Nothing. It was part of the overall repair." William looked at her steadily. "In that case, I have another job for you if you are willing. I need 2 new shirts made. My measurements are unusual and most tailors cannot get the proportions right." He shrugged out of the coat and began unbuttoning the shirt. "Would you be able to take proper measurements?" Penelope swallowed hard and pulled out her measuring tape. "Yes, of course." He removed the shirt, standing in just his undershirt, and she tried to focus on the technical aspects of the task rather than the sudden awkward intimacy of it. She measured his shoulders, chest, arm length, writing down each number in her small notebook. He stood perfectly still, patient as she worked. "Fabric preference?" she asked, stepping back. Whatever you think is best, I trust your judgment. Cotton is most practical for this climate. I can do them for $12 each, including materials. 25, William countered. Penelope blinked. That is too much. You are undervaluing yourself. Custom-made shirts from a skilled seamstress should cost at least $25, probably more. He pulled his shirt back on. In San Francisco, I would pay $40. This is not San Francisco. No, but the quality of the work is the same. Better, actually. He reached for his wallet again. $50 for 2 shirts, and I would like them before I leave town next week. She took the money because she did not know what else to do. $50. She had made more in 6 days than she usually made in half a year. It felt surreal, like something that would be snatched away at any moment. Miss Brennan, William said as she turned to leave, may I ask you something? Yes. Why do you let them treat you the way they do? The people in this town. Why do you accept such poor payment for work that is clearly worth much more? The question hit a nerve. Because if I do not work at all. They know I have no other options. I cannot leave, I have no family, no money saved. So I take what they offer or I starve. But now you have money saved, he pointed out. Almost $100. You could leave. And go where? Do what? I have no references, no connections. At least here I have a room and steady work, even if it is not fairly paid. William was quiet for a moment. What if you had references? What if you had connections? I do not understand. I know people. In San Francisco, in Denver, in Santa Fe, people who would pay you what you are worth. I could write you letters of introduction, he paused, or you could come work for me. Penelope's heart skipped. Work for you how? I have a ranch outside of San Diego. 20 men working for me, and not one of them can sew worth a damn. Buttons falling off, clothes torn to hell, looking like a band of outlaws instead of respectable cowboys. I could use someone to handle all the mending, make new items when needed. Room and board provided, plus a salary of $60 a month. $60 a month. The number was so absurd she almost laughed. Why would you offer me that? Because you are good at what you do, and I believe in paying people fairly. Because I am tired of seeing skilled workers exploited by people too cheap to appreciate quality. He met her eyes. And because I have spent the last week watching this town treat you like dirt, and it makes me angry. There was something fierce in his expression, something protective. It made Penelope's chest tighten. I barely know you, she said quietly. That is fair. Think about it. You do not have to decide now. He picked up one of the newly mended shirts. I am having dinner at the saloon tonight. Would you join me? So we can get to know each other better, and you can ask me any questions you have about the offer. If I have dinner with you, the whole town will assume things, Penelope warned. Let them assume. I do not care what they think, and you should not either. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger, more open. Please, I would enjoy the company. She should say no. She should take her money and her work and keep her head down like she always did. But something in her had shifted over the last 6 days. She had tasted what it felt like to be paid fairly, to be treated with respect, and she wanted more of it. All right, she said. I will have dinner with you. The saloon was the busiest place in Nogales after sundown, filled with ranchers and drifters and men spending their wages on whiskey and cards. Penelope had never been inside. Women who went into saloons were a certain type, and she had worked hard to avoid that reputation. But William was waiting for her outside the entrance, cleaned up and wearing one of his newly mended shirts, and when he offered his arm, she took it. The room went quiet when they walked in. Every eye turned toward them, speculation and judgment written plainly on faces she had known for years. William seemed oblivious to the attention, guiding her to a table in the corner and pulling out a chair for her. What would you like to eat? He asked. The steak here is decent, and I have been told the chicken is good too. I have never eaten here before, Penelope admitted. Then we will get one of each and share, and whatever pie they have for dessert." He signaled to the bartender, a man named Tom who had never spoken a civil word to Penelope in all the years she had lived here. "2 steak dinners, 2 chicken dinners, and a bottle of your best wine." Tom's eyebrows rose. "Wine? Is that a problem?" "No, sir, just surprised is all." William's expression cooled. "Surprised that I would order wine, or surprised that I would order it for the lady?" "Just surprised, sir." Tom retreated quickly. Penelope felt heat rise to her face. "You do not have to do that." "Do what? Defend me? Make a scene?" "I am not making a scene. I am ordering dinner." William leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Brennan. How did you end up in Nogales?" It was not a story she enjoyed telling, but his interest seemed genuine. "My parents died when I was 15. Fever took them both within a week of each other. We lived in Texas then, on a small farm. There was debt, so the land was sold. I had an aunt here, or so I thought. I traveled all the way to Nogales only to find out she had died 2 years earlier." "And you stayed?" "I had no money to go anywhere else. Mr. Garrison offered me the room above his store in exchange for sewing work. It seemed like a reasonable arrangement at the time." She looked down at her hands. "I did not realize he would pay me a quarter of what the work was worth, or that everyone else in town would follow his example. They are taking advantage of you. I know that. But what am I supposed to do about it? You could leave. Take my offer." The food arrived before she could respond, plates piled high with meat and potatoes and vegetables. The wine was poured into real glasses, not the tin cups most places used. Penelope could feel the entire saloon watching them, whispering behind hands. William raised his glass. "To new beginnings." She clinked her glass against his and took a sip. The wine was sweet and strong, warming her from the inside. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "You do not know me. I could be terrible at my job, I could steal from you, I could be any manner of awful person." "You could be," he agreed. "But I do not think you are. I think you are someone who has been beaten down by circumstance and cruel people, and you deserve better." He cut into his steak. "And selfishly, I do genuinely need someone who can sew. My men go through clothes like you would not believe." They ate and talked, and Penelope found herself relaxing despite the hostile attention from the rest of the room. William told her about his ranch, about the cattle business, about the places he had traveled. He had been born in Missouri, moved west after the war, built his ranch from nothing over the course of 15 years. "It is not an easy life," he said honestly. "The work is hard, the weather can be brutal, and the nearest town is an hour's ride. But it is good land, and the people who work for me are loyal. I treat them fairly, and they respect that." "How many people work for you?" 23, counting the cook and the housekeeper. "Most of them have been with me for at least 5 years. I do not have much turnover." He paused. "You would have your own room in the main house. Complete privacy. And before you worry, I am not offering you this position because I have any improper intentions. You would be an employee, nothing more. Unless you wanted it to be something more, but that would be entirely your choice." Penelope felt her face heat again. "I did not think that. I wanted to be clear. I have seen too many men use positions of power to take advantage of women. I will not be that kind of man." There was conviction in his voice that made her believe him. "I appreciate that." They finished dinner, and William ordered 2 pieces of apple pie. The conversation drifted to lighter topics, favorite books and childhood memories and silly things that made them both laugh. Penelope could not remember the last time she had laughed like this, freely and without restraint. When they finally left the saloon, the night air was cool and clear, stars scattered across the black sky. William walked her back to her room, taking the long way around the edge of town. "Think about my offer," he said when they reached her door. "You do not have to decide tonight or even this week, but know that it is genuine and I would be glad to have you. "I will think about it," Penelope promised. "Thank you for dinner. It was the nicest evening I have had in a very long time." He smiled at that, and she realized she liked his smile, the way it made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Good night, Miss Brennan." "Good night, Mr. Yates." She watched him walk away, then went inside and climbed the stairs to her room. The money was still hidden under the floorboard, solid proof that the last week had been real. She pulled it out and counted it again. $90. More than she had ever had at one time in her life. She could leave Nogales. She could actually leave. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The next morning, there was a knock at her door before dawn. Penelope opened it to find Mrs. Henderson standing in the hallway, her face tight with anger. "I need my dress," she said without preamble. "The one I paid you to make." "It is not finished yet. I told you it would take 2 weeks." "That was before you started taking on other work. I want it now." Penelope took a breath, trying to stay calm. "Mrs. Henderson, I have been working on your dress every spare moment I have. But it is detailed work and it cannot be rushed. It will be ready in 4 more days, just like I promised. You found time to do work for that cowboy fast enough. I heard he only gave you a week and you got it all done. He paid me $40. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. $40. That is robbery. That is what the work is worth. You are paying me $3 for a dress that will take me 80 hours to complete. Mr. Yates paid me fairly for the work I did. There is a difference." "I will not be spoken to like this by a seamstress," Mrs. Henderson snapped. "You will finish my dress by tomorrow, or I will make sure no one in this town ever hires you again." Something inside Penelope snapped. 5 years of swallowed anger, 5 years of bowing and scraping and accepting whatever scraps people threw at her, all of it came roaring to the surface. "No," she said clearly. Mrs. Henderson blinked. "What did you say?" I said no. "I will finish your dress when I said I would finish it in 4 days. If you do not like that, you are welcome to take your $3 back and find someone else to do the work. You cannot speak to me like that." "I just did. Now, if you will excuse me, I have paying work to do." Penelope closed the door in Mrs. Henderson's shocked face and locked it. Her hands were shaking, but she felt lighter than she had in years. She went to her sewing table and pulled out the fabric for William's shirts. Fine cotton, the color of a summer sky. She began cutting the pattern pieces, her mind already working through the construction. Word of her confrontation with Mrs. Henderson spread through town like wildfire. By midday, 3 more people had come to her door demanding their work be finished immediately, threatening to ruin her reputation, to have her thrown out of her room. Penelope turned them all away with the same calm refusal. She was done being exploited. William came by in the late afternoon with another bundle of items. "Heard you had an interesting morning," he said mildly. "News travels fast. Small town. And people have nothing better to do than gossip." He set down the bundle. "More mending, nothing urgent. Pay you another $20 for it. That is more than fair." She took the clothes and added them to the growing pile in her room. "Mr. Yates, about your offer." "Yes, I would like to accept it, if it is still available." His face broke into a wide smile. "It is absolutely still available. When can you be ready to leave?" "I have a few pieces of work to finish here. A week, maybe. That works perfectly. I need to finalize some contracts. Should take me about that long." He pulled out his wallet. "Here. Advance on your first month's salary. Get yourself whatever you need for the journey." She tried to protest, but he pressed the money into her hands. $60 more. She was holding a fortune, more money than most people in Nogales saw in a year. "One more thing," William said. "Would you have dinner with me again tonight?" "I enjoyed your company yesterday." Penelope thought about the gossip, the judgment, the way people would talk. Then she thought about William's smile, the way he treated her like she mattered. "Yes," she said, "I would like that." They had dinner at the saloon again, and again the room went quiet when they entered. But this time, William did not just ignore the attention. He stood up halfway through the meal, glass in hand, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I want to make an announcement," he said. "Miss Penelope Brennan has agreed to come work for me at my ranch in California. She will be leaving Nogales in 1 week. And I want everyone in this room to know that in the 6 days I have been in this town, I have paid her more for her sewing work than most of you have paid her in a year." Do you know why? The room was dead silent. Because she is extraordinarily skilled at what she does, and she deserves to be paid accordingly. What you people have been doing, paying her pennies for work that is worth dollars, is not just unfair. It is theft. You have been stealing from her for years, taking advantage of her situation because you knew she had no other options. His voice was hard now, edged with anger. Every single one of you should be ashamed. He sat down and the silence stretched. Then Mayor Frost stood up, his face red. "Now you wait just a minute," the mayor blustered. "We have been keeping that girl fed and housed. She should be grateful for what we have given her." "Grateful?" William's laugh was sharp. "You have been paying her starvation wages for skilled labor. That is not generosity, that is exploitation." He looked around the room. "And the worst part is, you all know it. You know exactly what you have been doing. You just did not care because it benefited you." Mr. Garrison stood up next. "She has a room in my building. I have been more than fair with her." "You charge her $15 a month for a room the size of a closet with a leaking roof and a window that does not close properly," William said coldly. "And you pay her $3 for a week's worth of work. That is not fair. That is criminal. You have no right to come into our town and tell us how to run our business," Mrs. Henderson said shrilly. "You are right. I do not. But I can tell Miss Brennan what her work is actually worth, and I can offer her a position where she will be treated with respect and paid fairly." "Which is exactly what I have done." William turned to Penelope. "Are you finished with your meal?" She nodded, throat tight. "Then let us leave. The company here is not particularly pleasant." They walked out together, and Penelope could feel the weight of the town's anger following them. But she also felt something else, vindication. William had said publicly what she had been thinking privately for years. He had called them out, shamed them in front of each other. "You did not have to do that," she said when they were outside. "Yes, I did. Someone needed to say it." He looked down at her, and his expression softened. "You deserve better than this place, Penelope. I hope you know that." It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it in his voice made something flutter in her chest. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for standing up for me. No one has ever done that before. Then people have been failing you for a long time." They walked slowly through the dark streets, in no hurry to end the evening. William told her more about the ranch, about the landscape and the ocean visible from the hills. Penelope told him about the things she wanted to sew when she had the time and resources, dresses and quilts and fine embroidered linens. When they reached her door, William took her hand gently. "1 week," he said. "Then we leave all of this behind." 1 week, she agreed. The next 7 days passed in a blur of activity. Penelope finished Mrs. Henderson's dress and delivered it with a bill for the full cost of materials and labor. When Mrs. Henderson refused to pay, Penelope took the dress back and sold it to a woman passing through town for $20. She completed the last of her outstanding work, collected what money she was owed from people who would actually pay, and wrote off the rest as lost. She used part of her savings to buy fabric for herself, enough to make 3 new dresses and several sets of undergarments. She bought sturdy boots and a wide-brimmed hat for traveling. She bought a better sewing kit, with sharp scissors and needles that had not been used into dullness. William's shirts were finished 2 days before they were due to leave. She poured everything she had into them, making each stitch perfect, the collars and cuffs precise. When she delivered them, he tried them on immediately. "These are incredible," he said, examining the fit. "Best shirts I have ever owned. I am glad you like them." He looked at her for a long moment. "Penelope, I want you to know that you do not have to come with me if you have changed your mind. I will not be angry or upset. This is a big decision, and you should not feel pressured." "I have not changed my mind," she said. "I want to go. I want to see what it is like to work somewhere that values me." "Good," he smiled. "Because I have gotten used to having dinner with you, and I would miss it if you were not there." The confession made her heart skip. Over the past week, those dinners had become the best part of her day. She looked forward to them, to the easy conversation and William's steady presence. He made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her parents died. "I would miss it too," she admitted. On their last night in Nogales, they had dinner at the hotel instead of the saloon. Mr. Dixon served them personally, his manner stiff and disapproving. William ignored him completely, focused entirely on Penelope. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Yes, but also excited. I have never been anywhere except Texas and Arizona." She paused. "What if I am not good enough? What if your men do not like my work?" "Then they can sew their own clothes," William said. "But that will not happen. You are exceptionally talented, Penelope. You just have not had the chance to see what you can do when people are not constantly undermining you. You have a lot of faith in me." "I have faith in what I have seen. You took my shabby, worn-out clothes and made them look almost new. You made me 2 shirts that fit better than anything I have ever bought from a tailor. You did all of that in a week, working in a room with terrible lighting and cheap materials." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Imagine what you could do with proper space, good materials, and time to work without someone breathing down your neck about money." His hand was warm and calloused, larger than hers but gentle. Penelope turned her palm up, threading her fingers through his. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. You changed my life, William. We changed it together," he said. "You are the one who had the courage to say yes." They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, while the hotel dining room emptied around them. Eventually, Mr. Dixon cleared his throat meaningfully, and they took the hint. William walked her back to her room one last time. "Tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock," he said. "The stage leaves at 7, so we should have plenty of time. I will be ready." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gentle touch that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. "Good night, Penelope." "Good night, William." She barely slept that night, too full of anticipation and nervous energy. She packed and repacked her few belongings, making sure everything was secure. The money was sewn into the lining of her coat, safe and hidden. She wore her new dress, the best one she had made, a deep blue cotton that fit her properly for the first time in years. William was waiting outside the hotel when she came down the stairs, a wagon loaded with his belongings parked on the street. He smiled when he saw her, and there was something in his eyes that made her stomach flip. "You look beautiful," he said. "Thank you." She let him help her into the wagon, settling onto the seat beside him. The morning air was cool and fresh, the sun just starting to paint the sky pink and gold. They rode through town in the early light, past the buildings and people that had been her entire world for 5 years. A few people were out, staring as they passed. Penelope raised her chin and looked straight ahead. She was done with Nogales, done with being small and quiet and grateful for scraps. The stage was waiting at the edge of town, horses stamping impatiently. William arranged for their luggage to be loaded, then bought their tickets. 2 seats to San Diego, departing in 10 minutes. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, teasing but with an edge of real concern. "I am not changing my mind." They boarded the stage along with 4 other passengers, a businessman, an older couple, and a young man who looked like a prospector. The interior was cramped but relatively clean. Penelope took the window seat and William sat beside her, his shoulder pressed against hers in the tight space. The stage lurched into motion, wheels creaking, and Nogales began to recede behind them. Penelope watched until the town disappeared completely, swallowed by dust and distance. Then she turned to William and smiled. "I am free," she said. "Yes, you are." The journey to San Diego took 4 days, crossing through some of the most beautiful and brutal landscape Penelope had ever seen. They traveled through desert where the heat shimmered on the horizon, through mountains where the air turned thin and cold. They stopped at way stations to change horses and eat questionable meals. They slept sitting up in the cramped stage, heads nodding against each other's shoulders. William was a considerate travel companion, making sure she had enough water, sharing his food when the way station offerings were particularly unappetizing. He told her stories to pass the time, about cattle drives and difficult clients, and the time he had to wrestle a mountain lion that tried to drag off one of his calves. "You are making that up," Penelope said, laughing. "I swear it is true. Ask any of my men, they will confirm it. I have the scars to prove it." He rolled up his sleeve, showing her a set of white lines across his forearm. "Got me good before I managed to chase it off." She traced the scars lightly with one finger. "You are very brave, or very stupid. Sometimes it is hard to tell the difference." He caught her hand and held it. "What about you? Any exciting stories from your seamstress career?" "Nothing involving mountain lions, unfortunately. Although I did once have to make a dress for a woman who insisted on being measured while wearing a corset laced so tight she could barely breathe. She fainted halfway through, and her husband accused me of trying to murder her." William laughed at that, a deep, genuine sound that made the other passengers look over. "What did you do?" Told him that if anyone was murdering his wife, it was the corset. He was not amused, but he paid me anyway. They talked and dozed and watched the landscape change outside the windows. By the 3rd day, Penelope noticed that William had started holding her hand even when they were not talking, their fingers intertwined naturally. She did not pull away. She liked the connection, the solid warmth of him beside her. On the 4th morning, they reached the California coast. Penelope pressed her face to the window, stunned by the sight of the ocean stretching endlessly blue under a clear sky. She had never seen so much water in her life. "Wait until you see it from the ranch," William said. "The view is even better." They disembarked in San Diego, a bustling port city that made Nogales look like a ghost town. The streets were crowded with people, horses, wagons loaded with goods from the ships in the harbor. The air smelled like salt and fish and humanity packed close together. William guided her through the chaos to where a man was waiting with 2 horses and a pack mule. "Penelope, this is Jack Miller, my foreman. Jack, this is Miss Penelope Brennan. She will be handling all the sewing and mending for the ranch." Jack was a wiry man in his 40s with a weather-beaten face and kind eyes. He tipped his hat to her. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Brennan. Boss has been talking about you nonstop for the past week." William's ears turned red. "I have not." "Sure you have not." Jack's grin was knowing. "I got your horse all saddled and ready. Figured Miss Brennan could ride the mare. She is gentle." Penelope eyed the horse nervously. "I have only ridden a few times." "Mare will take care of you," Jack assured her. "She has got more sense than most people I know." William helped her mount, his hand steadying at her waist. The horse shifted under her and Penelope grabbed the saddle horn tightly. But Jack was right. The mare was calm and patient, waiting for her to settle before moving. They rode out of San Diego and into the hills, following a well-worn trail. The landscape here was different from Arizona, greener and more lush. There were trees Penelope did not recognize, flowers blooming in wild profusion. And always, the ocean visible in the distance, glittering in the sun. After an hour, they crested a hill and William pulled up his horse. "There," he said, pointing. "That is home." The ranch spread out below them in a wide valley. There was a large main house built of adobe and wood, several barns and outbuildings, corrals full of horses and cattle. Beyond it all, the ocean stretched to the horizon, waves breaking white on a rocky shore. It was the most beautiful thing Penelope had ever seen. "Welcome to your new home," William said, and the pride in his voice was unmistakable. They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the house, people came out to meet them. Cowboys emerged from the barns, a Mexican woman in an apron appeared on the porch, and several dogs bounded forward barking greetings. William dismounted and helped Penelope down. "Everyone, this is Miss Penelope Brennan. She will be doing all the sewing work from now on, so please treat her with respect and for the love of God, try not to destroy your clothes faster than she can fix them." There was laughter at that, and several of the men stepped forward to introduce themselves. They were a diverse group, Mexicans and white men, one black cowboy, even a Chinese man who managed the vegetable garden. They all seemed genuinely pleased to have her there, shaking her hand and welcoming her warmly. The woman from the porch came down the steps, smiling. "I am Rosa, the housekeeper and cook. You must be exhausted from your journey. Come inside, I will show you your room." Penelope followed Rosa into the house, and her breath caught. The interior was spacious and well-maintained, with real furniture and rugs on the floor and curtains on the windows. It was more house than she had ever seen one person own. "Boss has been working on your room all week," Rosa said, leading her down a hallway. "He wanted to make sure it was perfect." She opened a door to reveal a large room with whitewashed walls, a real bed with a quilted coverlet, a wardrobe, a desk, and a sewing table set up by the window. The window itself was large and faced east, letting in beautiful morning light. There was even a small wood stove in the corner for heat. "This is mine," Penelope asked faintly. "All yours. Boss said you needed good light for your work, so he had this table made special, and that is your fabric." Rosa pointed to several trunks stacked against one wall. "He ordered it from San Francisco, said to get a variety of colors and weights so you would have what you needed." Penelope opened one of the trunks and nearly cried. Inside were bolts of fabric in every color imaginable, fine cotton and wool and linen and silk. Good quality material, the kind she had only dreamed of working with. "This must have cost a fortune," she said. "Boss does not do things halfway," Rosa said. "When he decides something is important, he commits fully, and apparently you are important." There was a knowing look in Rosa's eyes that made Penelope blush. "I am just an employee. Sure you are." "That is why he spent a week personally building your sewing table and riding to San Diego 3 times to make sure the fabric order was exactly right." Rosa patted her shoulder. "I have worked for him for 10 years, girl. I have never seen him put this much effort into anything that was not deeply personal." She left Penelope alone to settle in. Penelope sat on the bed, which was softer than anything she had slept on in years, and looked around the room. Her room. Her own private space with a door that locked and a window that closed and a stove that worked. She had not realized how much she had been holding herself tense, braced for the next humiliation, the next disappointment. Here, in this space, she could finally breathe. There was a knock on the door. "Penelope, may I come in?" "Yes." William entered, ducking slightly under the doorframe. "What do you think? It is perfect. Too much, but perfect." "It is not too much. You need proper space to do good work." He crossed to the window and adjusted the curtain. "If the table is not the right height, I can fix it. And if you need anything else, more light or different chairs or whatever, just tell me." "William." She stood and walked over to him. "Why are you doing all of this?" He turned to face her, and the expression in his eyes made her heart race. "Because I care about you. I have cared about you since the day I met you, watching you work yourself to exhaustion in that terrible room for people who did not appreciate you. I wanted to give you something better. I wanted to give you everything you deserved. You barely know me. I know you are kind and talented and strong. I know you make me laugh, and you listen when I talk about things that interest me, and you are not impressed by money or status. I know that I have spent the past 2 weeks thinking about you constantly, and I have never felt this way about anyone before. He took her hands. I am falling in love with you, Penelope. Maybe I already have fallen. And I know that might be too much too fast, and you can tell me to back off, but I wanted you to know. Penelope's throat was tight, her eyes burning. I am falling in love with you too, she whispered. I have been since that first day when you paid me fairly and treated me like I mattered. No one has ever made me feel the way you do. William pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and she melted into his embrace. He was warm and solid and safe, everything she had been searching for without knowing it. I am going to court you properly, he said into her hair. I am going to take you on rides along the ocean and bring you flowers and ask you to marry me when the time is right. But I needed you to know how I felt. I would like that, Penelope said, smiling against his chest. The courting and the flowers and especially the marrying part, eventually. He laughed and pulled back just enough to look at her. Eventually, after a reasonable amount of time has passed, I do not want people to think I only came here to trap you into marriage. Anyone who thinks that is an idiot, but I will wait as long as you need. He kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then hesitated, asking permission. Penelope rose on her toes and kissed him properly, her first real kiss, and it was everything she had hoped it would be. Sweet and gentle and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. I should let you rest, William said reluctantly. You have had a long journey, and Rosa is making a big dinner to welcome you. What time is dinner? 6. Then I have 3 hours to start on some of the mending. Jack mentioned there were several bags of torn clothes waiting for me. William's expression turned pained. You do not have to start working immediately. Take a few days to settle in. I want to work. I want to see what I can do now that I have proper light and good materials and time to do it right. She squeezed his hand. Besides, I need to prove to your men that you did not make a mistake hiring me. I did not make a mistake. But if it makes you happy to work, I will have Jack bring over the mending. He kissed her hand before releasing it. I am glad you are here, Penelope. I am glad I am here too. The first few weeks on the ranch passed in a blur of activity and discovery. Penelope settled into a routine, waking early to work on mending while the light was best, taking breaks to explore the ranch and learn the names of all the men who worked there. They were respectful and friendly, grateful to have someone who could fix their clothes properly. She worked steadily through the backlog of torn shirts and worn trousers, adding patches and reinforcing seams and replacing buttons. William kept his promise about courting her properly. They had dinner together every evening, sometimes just the two of them, sometimes with Rosa and Jack. He took her riding along the cliffs, showing her tide pools and hidden beaches. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, bright poppies and lupines. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, content to hold her hand and steal kisses when they were alone. Penelope had never been so happy. The work was challenging but satisfying, the environment was beautiful, and William was everything she had ever wanted in a partner. He was kind and patient, funny and intelligent. He respected her opinions, valued her work, and made her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. 2 months after she arrived, William proposed. They were sitting on the cliffs watching the sunset, the ocean painted orange and pink beneath them. He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small emerald. I love you, Penelope Brennan, he said. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? She was crying before he even finished. Yes, yes, of course, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. I had it made in San Diego. The emerald reminded me of your eyes. You are going to make me cry even harder if you keep saying things like that. Good. Happy tears are my favorite. He kissed her, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. They were married 6 weeks later in San Diego, in a small church with Rosa and Jack and a few of the ranch hands as witnesses. Penelope wore a dress she had made herself, cream-colored silk with delicate embroidery on the bodice. William wore a new suit, also made by her, tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, William kissed her like he was never going to let her go, and the small gathering cheered. The reception was held at the ranch, with food and music and dancing that lasted until well past midnight. The men presented them with gifts, hand-carved furniture and embroidered linens, and even a painting of the ranch that one of them had been working on in secret. "You are part of this family now," Jack said, raising a glass. "We could not be happier for you both." Penelope felt like her heart might burst from the sheer joy of it. She had gone from being alone and exploited to being loved and valued in the space of a few months. It felt like a dream, except it was real and solid and hers. That night, in the room that had become theirs, William undressed her slowly, reverently, kissing each new bit of exposed skin. "I love you," he murmured against her throat. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Penelope said, running her hands over his chest, learning the topography of his body. Show me how much." He did, and it was everything she had hoped and more, tender and passionate and overwhelming in the best way. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his hand stroking her hair. "Are you happy?" William asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible." She tilted her head to look at him. "Thank you for seeing me, for valuing me, for giving me a chance to have this life. Thank you for trusting me enough to take that chance." He kissed the top of her head. "We are going to have an amazing life together, Penelope Yates. I know we will." The first year of their marriage was full of adjustments and discoveries. Penelope learned the rhythms of the ranch, the busy seasons and the quiet ones. She expanded her sewing work beyond just mending, making curtains for the bunkhouse, quilts for the beds, even a set of embroidered pillowcases as a gift for Rosa. William taught her to ride properly, and they spent Sunday afternoons exploring the coastline and the hills beyond the ranch. They fought sometimes, usually about small things like William working too hard or Penelope not asking for help when she needed it. But they learned to communicate, to apologize, to meet each other halfway. The foundation they had built on mutual respect and genuine affection proved strong enough to weather any disagreement. In the spring of their second year together, Penelope realized she was pregnant. She told William over breakfast, simply and directly, "I am going to have a baby." He dropped his fork. "A baby? We are having a baby." "Yes." William let out a whoop of joy and scooped her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating, his voice full of wonder. "When? How are you feeling?" "Do you need anything? I am fine. Rosa has been helping me. The baby should come in October." She took his hands and placed them on her still flat stomach. "Are you happy?" "I am beyond happy. I am delirious." He kissed her thoroughly. "You are amazing. You are growing a human, our human." The pregnancy was relatively easy, which Rosa said was a blessing. Penelope continued working through most of it, sewing tiny clothes and blankets for the baby. William fussed over her constantly, making sure she was comfortable and rested and eating enough. The men on the ranch were nearly as excited as William, offering unsolicited advice and building a beautiful cradle as a gift. Their son was born on a cool October evening, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the entire household. He had William's dark hair and Penelope's green eyes, and he was the most perfect thing either of them had ever seen. "What should we name him?" William asked, cradling the baby awkwardly but carefully. What about James, after your father? James Yates. William tested the name, smiling. I like it. James William Yates. James was a healthy, happy baby who grew quickly and smiled early. Penelope cut back on her sewing work to care for him, but William hired a young woman from town to help with household tasks, so Penelope could rest and spend time with their son. 2 years later, they had a daughter. Elizabeth came into the world on a warm spring morning, quieter than her brother, but just as perfect. She had William's smile and Penelope's determination, and she wrapped everyone on the ranch around her tiny finger within days. Life settled into a beautiful pattern. The ranch prospered under William's management, growing slowly but steadily. Penelope's reputation as a seamstress spread, and she began taking occasional commissions from wealthy families in San Diego, making elaborate dresses and suits that commanded high prices. She sent some of the money to charity organizations that helped women in situations like the one she had escaped, wanting to give others the chances she had been given. When James was 6 and Elizabeth was 4, they took a family trip north to San Francisco. The children were wide-eyed at the big city, at the tall buildings and crowded streets. William took them to the docks to see the ships, and Penelope took them to a fabric shop that was 3 stories tall and filled with every material imaginable. "This is incredible," she said, running her hands over bolts of velvet and silk and fine wool. "I could spend a year in here and not see everything." "Buy whatever you want," William said. "Consider it an investment in your business." She picked out fabrics and notions, ribbons and lace and thread in every color. The bill was enormous, but William paid it without blinking. As they left the shop, arms full of packages, Elizabeth tugged on Penelope's skirt. "Mama, are we rich?" Penelope looked at William, who was carrying James on his shoulders and grinning at her over their packages. She thought about the ranch, their home, the life they had built together. "Yes, sweetheart," she said. "We are very rich, not just in money, but in all the ways that matter." That night, in their hotel room with the children asleep in the adjoining space, William pulled her close. "Do you ever think about Nogales, about what your life would have been like if we had never met?" "Sometimes," Penelope admitted, "but not with regret, more with gratitude that I escaped." "That you helped me escape." She kissed him softly. "You changed everything for me, William. You saw me when no one else did. You valued me when everyone else was content to use me. You gave me a life I never could have imagined." "You did the hard part," William said. "You had the courage to take the risk, to trust me, to start over. And you have built something amazing. Your sewing work is known all over California now. People request you specifically. Because you believed in me enough to give me the chance to show what I could do." She rested her head on his shoulder. "We did this together. We built this life together. I would not have it any other way." The years continued to unfold in joy and occasional challenges. There were droughts that tested the ranch. A year when Elizabeth was seriously ill with fever and they nearly lost her. Moments of fear and worry that came with any life. But through it all, their foundation held strong. They loved each other, supported each other, worked together to build something lasting. When James was 16, he announced his intention to become a rancher like his father. William beamed with pride and began teaching him the intricacies of the cattle business, taking him on buying trips and letting him manage increasingly complex parts of the operation. Elizabeth, at 14, showed no interest in ranching but loved working with her mother. She had inherited Penelope's skill with a needle, and her designs were creative and bold. Together, they started taking more elaborate commissions, creating dresses for society women in San Francisco and Los Angeles that were talked about in newspapers. "You have a real gift," Penelope told her daughter as they worked together one afternoon, collaborating on a dress for a senator's wife. "Better than mine, I think." "I learned from the best," Elizabeth said, And I had advantages you never did. Good light, good materials, time to practice and experiment. You had to fight for everything. I want you to never forget how lucky we are, Penelope said seriously. There are women right now in situations like I was in, being exploited and underpaid. We have a responsibility to do better, to help when we can. I know, Mama. That is why I want to start a workshop, a place where women can learn to sew and earn fair wages for their work. We could teach them skills, help them find positions, make sure they are never taken advantage of the way you were. Penelope felt her eyes fill with tears. That is a wonderful idea. Let us talk to your father about it. I think he would support it. William not only supported it, he helped fund it. They opened a small workshop in San Diego, offering training and fair wage employment to women who needed it. Elizabeth ran it with passion and determination, creating a place where women could learn, grow, and support themselves with dignity. The workshop thrived, and within a few years, they had expanded to include training in other skills beyond sewing. They taught bookkeeping and business management, helped women find positions in offices and shops, created a network of support that extended across Southern California. One afternoon, a young woman came to the workshop asking for help. She was thin and exhausted, her dress patched and repatched. I heard you pay fair wages, she said. I am a seamstress. I have been working in Yuma, but they only pay me pennies. I cannot live on it anymore. Penelope saw herself in the young woman's tired eyes. What is your name, Sarah? Sarah, I was exactly where you are 15 years ago, and someone gave me a chance. Now I am going to give you the same chance. She led Sarah into the workshop. We will teach you what you need to know. We will pay you what your work is worth, and we will help you build a better life. You are safe here. Sarah began to cry, and Penelope held her while she sobbed out years of frustration and exhaustion. It is going to be all right, she murmured. You are going to be all right. That evening, she told William about Sarah. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained for almost 20 years. She reminded me so much of myself, Penelope said, desperate and exhausted and just trying to survive. And now she has the same chance you did, William said. You are changing lives, Penelope. Dozens of women, maybe hundreds eventually. That is your legacy. Our legacy, she corrected. I could not have done any of this without you. Without your support, your belief in me, your willingness to see me as more than what Nogales thought I was. William took her hand, his fingers automatically finding their familiar places between hers. Do you remember that day in the saloon when I told the whole town they should be ashamed? How could I forget? You were magnificent. I was angry, furious actually, but also terrified that you would refuse my offer, that you would stay in that terrible situation because you did not trust me. He looked at her. When you said yes, when you agreed to come with me, I felt like I had been given something precious. And every day since has only confirmed that feeling. I love you, Penelope said, her voice thick with emotion. I love the life we have built, the family we have created, the good we have been able to do. I love all of it, and I love that we have done it together. I love you too. William pulled her close. Always have, always will. They sat together as the sun sank below the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Behind them, the house was warm with light and the sounds of their children laughing. Around them, the ranch stretched out peaceful and prosperous, the result of years of hard work and careful management. James came out onto the porch, now a young man of 20 with his father's height and his mother's eyes. Dinner is ready. Elizabeth made her famous pot roast. She cooked, William asked, amused. This I have to see. They went inside together, the family gathering around the large dining table. Rosa was there too, retired from active work but still living on the ranch, treated as family. Jack had passed away 2 years earlier, but his son now worked as foreman, carrying on his father's legacy. The meal was lively and warm, full of conversation and teasing and laughter. Elizabeth had indeed made pot roast, and it was actually quite good, though William exaggerated his surprise until she threw a napkin at him. James talked about his plans for expanding the herd, ideas he had been developing with careful thought. Rosa told stories about the old days, when the ranch was half its current size and everyone was learning as they went. After dinner, William and Penelope walked down to the beach, another long-standing tradition. The sand was cool under their feet, the waves rushing up to meet them. "Do you ever regret it?" William asked. "Leaving Arizona, starting over with someone you barely knew?" "Never, not for a single moment." Penelope stopped and turned to face him. "You gave me everything, William, not just material comfort, though that is wonderful, but you gave me dignity. You gave me the chance to see what I was capable of when I was not being constantly pushed down. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. How could I ever regret that?" "I gave you a chance," William said. "But you are the one who took it and turned it into something extraordinary. You are the one who built a business, who raised our children, who started a workshop that is changing lives. You are the one who did all of that." "We did it together," Penelope insisted. "That is what I love most about us. We are partners, equal partners. You never tried to control me or diminish me. You always lifted me up. Because you deserve to be lifted up. You always did." William cupped her face in his hands. "I am so proud of you, Penelope. Of everything you have accomplished, of the woman you are. I am the luckiest man alive." She kissed him then, long and deep, the ocean crashing behind them and the stars beginning to emerge overhead. After all these years, his kiss still made her heart race, still made her feel cherished and loved and seen. They walked back to the house hand in hand, comfortable in the silence. The lights were on inside, welcoming them home. This was their life, built from nothing, sustained by love and respect and hard work. It was more than Penelope had ever dreamed possible on that day in Nogales, when a stranger had walked into her cramped room and offered her a chance at something better. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Elizabeth's workshop expanded to 3 locations across California, helping hundreds of women learn trades and earn fair wages. James took over more of the ranch management as William gradually stepped back, ready to enjoy more leisure time with Penelope. They became grandparents when James married and had children, 2 boys and a girl who ran wild across the ranch, just as their father had. Elizabeth never married, declaring herself too busy with her work, but she was a devoted aunt who spoiled her nieces and nephews shamelessly. On their 30th anniversary, William took Penelope back to San Diego, to the same hotel where they had stayed on their wedding night. The city had grown and changed, but some things remained the same. The ocean still stretched endlessly blue, the sunset still painted the sky in impossible colors. 30 years, William said, pouring champagne. Sometimes it feels like 30 minutes, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. "I know what you mean." Penelope accepted the glass. "I cannot imagine my life without you in it. I do not want to. You will never have to." He clinked his glass against hers. "To 30 more years." "To 30 more years," she echoed. They did not get 30 more years, but they got 15, which was more than many people received. William died peacefully in his sleep at age 72, his hand in Penelope's, his family surrounding him. He had lived a good life, a full life, and he left behind a legacy of fairness and kindness that extended far beyond the ranch. Penelope grieved deeply, but without regret. She had been given a gift, 30 years with a man who had loved her completely, who had seen her potential and helped her realize it. Not everyone was so lucky. She lived another 10 years, continuing to work with Elizabeth on the workshops, watching her grandchildren grow, tending the ranch that William had built. On her final day, she sat on the porch watching the sunset, the same view she had shared with William for decades. James and Elizabeth were with her, along with several of her grandchildren. "Tell us about how you and Papa met," one of the grandchildren asked, a question she had answered many times but never tired of. "He walked into my room in a dusty little town in Arizona," Penelope began, her voice strong despite her age. "And he paid me fairly for my work. It seems like such a small thing now, but it changed everything. It showed me that I deserved better, that my work had value, that I had value. And from that moment on, we built a life together based on respect and love and partnership." "He saved you," the grandchild said. "No," Penelope corrected gently. "He gave me the opportunity to save myself. There is a difference. He believed in me, he supported me, he loved me, but I did the work. I made the choices. I built the life I wanted." She looked at her children and grandchildren, at the sunset painting everything gold. "That is what I want you to remember. Help each other, believe in each other, create opportunities for each other. But never forget that each person has to do their own work, make their own choices. That is what dignity looks like. That is what respect looks like." She closed her eyes as the sun slipped below the horizon, and she did not open them again. She passed peacefully, surrounded by love, secure in the knowledge that she had lived well and fully, that she had taken the chance William offered her and turned it into something magnificent. They buried her next to William on a hill overlooking the ocean, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, women from the workshops she had founded, ranch hands who had worked for the family for decades, business associates and friends, and the ever-expanding family she had created. Elizabeth gave the eulogy, her voice steady despite her tears. "My mother started with nothing. Less than nothing, actually. She was alone and exploited and desperate, but she had skills and determination and courage. When my father recognized those qualities and offered her a chance, she took it. And she spent the next 50 years proving that when women are given fair opportunities, when they are valued and supported and paid what they are worth, they can accomplish extraordinary things." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "My mother's legacy is not just our family, though we are certainly part of it. Her legacy is every woman who learned a trade at one of our workshops, every woman who earned a fair wage, every woman who realized she deserved better and had the courage to pursue it. That is what she built with my father. Not just a successful ranch or a thriving business, but a model for how people should treat each other. With respect, with fairness, with recognition that everyone has value." The service ended, and people lingered, sharing stories about Penelope, about her kindness and her skill and her unwavering belief in treating people fairly. As the crowd dispersed, Elizabeth stood at her mother's grave with James beside her. "She would have loved this," James said. "All these people, all these stories." "She would have been embarrassed by the attention," Elizabeth corrected, "but pleased by the impact. That was always what mattered to her, not recognition but results, actually changing lives." "Then let us make sure we continue that work," James said. "Keep the workshops going, keep the ranch operating on the same principles Papa established. Make sure that what they built together continues." "Always," Elizabeth agreed. The sun was setting again, the sky turning gold and pink and orange. The same view Penelope had loved for 50 years, the same view that had represented home and safety and love. The ranch would go on, the workshops would continue, and the legacy of a seamstress who refused to be exploited and a cowboy who believed in paying fairly would ripple outward for generations. It was a good life, well lived. It was a love story for the ages. And it all started with one simple act of fairness, one man who saw value where others saw opportunity for exploitation, one woman who had the courage to take a chance on something better. Together, they had proved that treating people with dignity and respect was not just morally right. It was the foundation for building something lasting and beautiful. The ranch house glowed in the twilight, warm and welcoming, full of family and laughter and love. The ocean crashed against the shore, eternal and unchanging. And on a hill overlooking it all, two simple headstones stood side by side. William Yates, 1848–1920, beloved husband, father, friend, he treated everyone fairly. Penelope Brennan Yates, 1859–1935, beloved wife, mother, friend, she showed the world her worth together. They had changed everything. And that was the best legacy anyone could leave behind.